Good morning, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you all to our Climate Hubs session. We've got a great group of people from the Climate Hubs across the nation, and we want to share with you some of the work we do, both in conservation and in other actions. And I'll be, first of all, covering a brief introduction to the Climate Hubs program, and then each of our presenters here will give you a deeper dive into what we do. So my name is Katie Steele, and I'm the coordinator of the Southwest Climate Hub and College Associate Professor at New Mexico State University. And so just going to try sharing my screen now so I can give you this overview for the USDA Climate Hub's intro presentation. Let's see if this works. Okay. So, Emily, can you tell me if this is showing?
It is. It looks great.
Wonderful. It's always fun learning a new technology and a new platform for streaming. We're all Zoom people here, so learning Socio has been great fun. So let me get started with this overview. The USDA Climate Hubs were established in 2014, and they're a unique collaboration across multiple USDA agencies. They're principally Agricultural Research Service, Forest Service, and NRCS, but APHIS, RMA, Rural Development, Farm Service Agency are all involved at one degree or another. The hubs were designed to develop and deliver science-based, regional-specific information and technologies to agricultural and natural resource managers. And this is principally for adapting to climate change, but also for enabling climate-informed decision-making to current extreme events and current disasters. And we also mean to provide access and assistance to implement adaptation and response actions. So there's 10 hubs across the country. Each has a particular region. What might be not so clear from here is the Northern Forest Hub also covers the area of the Midwest and the Northeast Hub. Each hub is situated to respond to those unique climate vulnerabilities and stakeholder needs in the region. And what I'd really like you to understand is that we're a small program, but we have an outsized impact thanks to our partnerships and collaborations and networking. We've got a very small core staff, and you can see some of them here on the left-hand side of the slide. And some of these folks, but not all, are shown here. But we do have a great abundance of wonderful partners who help us leverage what we have and expand our impact. So climate hubs are really bridging of organizations, if you like, and we enable climate resilient actions in agriculture and forestry by facilitating communication and also creating capacity amongst our partner organizations. We work closely with Extension. We deliver science-based tools and strategies to agriculture and forest land managers. And we respond to climate change-related challenges such as drought, extreme weather, and changing growing seasons. And we also engage with other stakeholders and partners to understand and to help lower the barriers to adopting kinds of adaptive practices that can help manage risk and also enhance productivity. So as part of our work, each hub has conducted vulnerability, impact, and risk assessments. And I won't spend too long on this slide. This is just an example, and to point you to, let me hide that, and then you can see our link here. But if you Google Climate Hubs and USDA, it will take you straight to this website. We also produce these fact sheets as part of synthesizing the science and technology information into something that's more compact and understandable. So fact sheets and also information briefs are important, as well as some of the new media modalities like interactive story maps and webcasts and podcasts. So we've worked closely with partners also to develop decision support tools that can be used for climate-informed decision-making. One example here from the Northern Plains Hub is Grasscast. The northern forests are very well known for their adaptation resources, both for forests and agriculture. And they're working with a whole bunch of other different hubs to make sure these adaptation resources are appropriate for the different regions. And then I'd like to also highlight the Aggressed Viewer, which was produced by my hub and our fellow Julian Reyes when he was here, the Aggressed Viewer, which takes risk management agency data and helps you visualize it both spatially by county, but also as graphs. So we also work with partners and stakeholders to ensure that information exchange is a two-way street between us, the hubs, and our stakeholders, but also between stakeholders and stakeholders. So we've got different levels of stakeholders, both agency folks and USDA extension, but also the people they serve. Examples might be the Drought Learning Network pictured here, Farming in the New Normal, which was a workshop in California, and also this Learning from Your Neighbor, Climate Resiliency in Agriculture, another example from the Northern Plains. So I invite you to connect with us. It was a bit of a whistle-stop tour there. Here's our website. Here's Lauren's email address. She apologizes she couldn't make it today. Here's my email address, but the others will also share their email addresses too. So now I would like to pass on to, thanks NordVPN, excuse me. I'd like to pass on now to Jessica from the Northwest Hub. So Jessica, if you would like to introduce yourself while I stop sharing my screen.
We'll do that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Katie, for the introduction. Just get this going here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Northwest Hub today, typically around resources we have related to wildfire and drought. So the Northwest Hub covers Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Alaska. It's a big area. These are areas, especially in the eastern parts of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, where drought and fire have always been issues. But with climate change, we're seeing they're becoming increasingly common. And so the hub works to help landowners prepare for and respond to these disturbances. So to help landowners prepare and respond to drought, the Northwest Hub works with the Pacific Northwest Drought Early Warning System. And we conduct webinars every other month on drought status and impacts. And a variety of different partners join these webinars. We also put updates on the Northwest Climate Hub website and in our monthly newsletters, along with resources to help landowners increase resilience to drought. The Northwest Hub has also done a lot of work related to drought in southeastern Alaska, which isn't necessarily a place you would think of drought, but nevertheless, there have been some pretty serious droughts there in the last decade. And so this work has really revolved around defining what drought looks like in a temperate rainforest, how that's affected people in the past, and what Alaskan landowners and managers can do to prepare for more drought in the future. So one of the roles of the hub is to compile and also curate information for a variety of different audiences. And the Northwest Hub has done this for fire and smoke topics. So we have a page with fire resources and smoke information. These have been very popular lately in the Northwest. And the information is organized at the national, regional, and state levels. Again, it's intended for a variety of different audiences. And it covers current event information, what's the current status of smoke and air quality, as well as resources for post-fire management. The Northwest Hub also supports the co-production of research related to fire and drought. So an example of this is something we call the West Side Fire Initiative. So fire has historically been very rare west of the Cascade Mountains in Oregon and Washington. But with climate change, risk is increasing. These are kind of the wet, drippy forests you think of when you think of the Northwest. But this is especially important that fire risk is increasing in these places because that's where a lot of the population of these states are. So the hub has worked with the Forest Service Pacific Northwest Research Station to convene partners around the issue, of Westside Fire to help determine their needs, develop key research questions, and facilitate the co-production of research. So we have several ongoing projects covering this topic, from potential preparedness activities to risk assessment, post-fire management, and also social issues. And another tool we work on is called the seed lot selection tool. And this is a tool that was created with the Forest Service Pacific Northwest Research Station to help managers determine what seeds might be most appropriate for their planting sites, given climate change. And so the tool is very powerful, but we have found that it can be a bit overwhelming for users. So the Northwest Hub is developing some user guides for both specialists like silviculturists and non-specialists. So trying to help make this tool easier to use and more broadly applied. And the Northwest Hub has also supported a lot of different climate change vulnerability assessments in the region that address fire and drought. And so after the assessments are developed, the Hub has helped support adaptation workshops where land managers develop adaptation strategies and tactics to address key climate change vulnerabilities. And so from over 30 different workshops across the Western US, some of which the Northwest Hub has been involved in, there is a compilation of all of the adaptation strategies and tactics in something called the Climate Change Adaptation Library. And so this database has over 900 climate change adaptation tactics for different resource areas, including water, fish, wildlife. And so the GIFs can give users different ideas about how to adapt to changing disturbances. And the Climate Hub took these adaptation tactics in the library and synthesized them into a resource we call the Risk Management Practices. And so this is an online resource for, it lists key climate change vulnerabilities for a variety of different resource areas, and then gives a list of key adaptation practices that will help reduce climate change risk to these resources. These were developed for the Northwest, but many apply more broadly across the Western US, and these can be found on the Northwest Hub webpage. So if you'd like any additional information, I encourage you to visit the Northwest Hub website or get in touch with our coordinator, Holly Prendeville, or myself. Thanks very much, and I'll pass it over to Emily.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Emily Elias. I'm the director of the Southwest Climate Hub, but I am also the pinch hitter today for Steve McNulty, who's the director of the Southeast Climate Hub. And we will be, or I will be talking about climate disturbance impacts and how to help people adapt to those. So as you can see here in 2020, there were many billion-dollar weather and climate disasters, and the Southeast has more types and a larger number of those billion-dollar disasters than elsewhere in the United States. Those include hurricanes and tornadoes, severe thunderstorms and hailstorms. And the climate stresses have many negative impacts that need to be addressed. That can be disruption to water supply and distribution. That can be impacts on forest productivity and health and management. That's also impacts on agricultural commodities, complete decimation of a crop, but also impacting when you can plant, when you can harvest based on field conditions. Those climate stresses can also lead to property damage and impacts to both human health and well-being. So the following are two examples of the Southeast Climate Hub addressing these climate-related issues through the development of land manager guides. So this first project is focused on hurricane impacts. So the Southeastern Hub was working to provide information to coastal farmers and ranchers and foresters with these guides to prepare for and recover from hurricanes. And as you can see here, there are guides for different commodities, so rice and corn and dairy, and there are 23 different guides. If you're interested in those guides, please follow the URL, follow the link on the Southwest Climate Hub site, and you can find them. All of the guides are organized the same way. So the hurricane preparation and recovery guides have 4 sections. The first section is something that you would do well before a hurricane hits, and that's how you would work on building a resilient operation, something that you can do early on. The second section is around long-term operation maintenance, and so it's what you would do on an annual to a monthly time step to maintain that first section. The third section is the short-term preparedness section. And so that's what you look to when you know a hurricane is coming. That's 1 to 7 days pre-hurricane. It's where you would look for updates on hurricane tracking. It's where you might think to take photos and pictures of what you have and store information and store those photos somewhere safe and secure. And then the fourth section is post-hurricane recovery, and that's targeted for the 1 week to 1 month time period. And this is thought to be an iterative process. So then you'd start again after the hurricane with building a resilient operation. And again, these are for 23 different commodities, and they can be found on the Southeast Hub website. The second project I want to talk about relates to soil salinization on working lands in the Southeast US. And you can see the project partners listed here. So the objective of this project was to provide, again, that same group of people, coastal farmers, foresters, and ranchers, with guidance to identify, mitigate, and adapt to soil salinization. And the sub-objectives are really to understand the drivers, to identify the issues, to manage for resilience, and then identify adaptation measures to maintain productivity. So the motivation behind this is that soil salinization in coastal southeastern US is becoming more prevalent as both storm surges increase in frequency and as sea levels rise. Salinization reduces productivity of working lands and can prevent, sorry, the private chat just popped up, sorry, can prevent crops from growing. And resources are lacking for landowners to understand this issue and how to manage for resilience. And action needs to be taken if land is to remain profitable as conditions change. And so this guide is organized by different stages of coastal soil salinity, from stage 0, which is non-impacted, all the way to stage 5, which has chronic surface water. Landowners can tell where they are in the stage process by the electrical conductivity that they can measure themselves. And then there are adaptation and mitigation measured for those measurements or actions presented.
Oh dear. Of course, technology seems to have thrown Emily off, and Bill, which is unfortunate because Bill's the next presenter after Emily. I apologize for that. One thing that is lucky is that we are running 2 minutes ahead of time, so we do have some buffer time, and we've built in buffer time between presentations. So with just Jessica, oh, Emily's back. So while Emily gets ready to share again, I just want to encourage the audience to share questions in the chat box. Okay, Emily, if you're ready, I'll hand back to you.
Okay, perfect timing. Sorry about that, everyone. I guess we had connectivity issues. I must have popped off. I'm not sure where it ended, but I will say, please just go to the Southeast Hub website if you're interested in the hurricane guides, or if you're interested in the saltwater intrusion and soil salinization. You can find that website here or reach out to Steve McNulty, the director of the Southeast Hub. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. While we wait for Bill to rejoin us, oh, no, look at that. I just say the name and Bill pops up. That's fantastic. So, Bill, if you would like to share your screen and introduce yourself.
Sure.
Oh, thanks. And Sherry, thank you for your question. We'll be getting to your questions in the discussion section, which is after Bill's presentation. So thanks. And everybody in the audience, follow Sherry's example and please share your questions with us.
Okay, wouldn't you know it, my connection disappeared, right? But I'm back. So I'm Bill Gould. I'm the director of the USDA Caribbean Climate Hub, and I'm a research ecologist with the International Institute of Tropical Forestry down in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Thanks to the session organizers and the meeting organizers for the opportunity. I want to talk a little bit about how climate change and extreme events are kind of shaping the conversation about forest management in our region. And since our hub was initiated, we've really looked at the history and the culture of both forestry and agriculture in the region so that we can be as effective as we can in communicating and trying to get the adaptation of new techniques and methods and things in our area to respond to climate change. So if you go back to pre-Columbian days, the islands were nearly completely forested, broadleaf evergreen forests, lots of tree species diversity, lots of variation in soils and in climates across the region. But in the 1900s, most of the islands were deforested for agriculture. And you can see a little graphic there of the decline, which reached its low point in the 1940s or 50s in terms of forest cover. And that represents a shift from agricultural economy to industrialization, urbanization, a lot of agricultural abandonment occurring in that period, and regrowth of forests, both due to management and to natural reforestation. And there's a little inset photo there of a big slab of an endemic magnolia that was harvested back in the 30s. And since in the 2000s, we've continued that growth, that return of forest cover, primarily by natural succession on abandoned lands. But around 2000, we reached a point where we're now greater than 50% forest cover. And most of the native species have returned, and a lot of introduced trees in that mix. And the key perception of the value of these forests is for watershed protection, biodiversity protection, and habitat conservation. There's not a lot in that conversation about the benefits of wood products or non-wood forest products. Most of those sorts of perceptions were really lost with the wood industry during this period of deforestation. But we have a good sense of kind of the all lands concept of conservation in the region that applies to those forests. 2017, we had really transformative events with 2 Category 4 and 5 hurricanes that passed nearby or over the island and had effects on all aspects of society, particularly communications, transportation, and power. Our Climate Hub was involved in a lot of study, still is, and review of these effects. And we see that down trees have a high level of effect, not only in the Caribbean, but throughout the Southeast. And they interact with infrastructure, with power, with transportation to create effects that need to be dealt with. In the Caribbean, we had, after those 2017 hurricanes, nearly 30 million trees that were downed or damaged. That created 4 to 6 million cubic yards of vegetative debris that had to be dealt with. And in that debris, there were hundreds of species of tropical hardwood, high-value hardwoods. And the post-hurricane planning was to burn or put those in landfills. And there was a lot of public outcry whether that was the best use of that material. So in response, there's been an effort on our part of the Climate Hub to raise awareness and try to build capacity in that wood industry that we had lost. And as part of that interest in redeveloping or reinventing the wood industry in the region was the idea that can't happen apart from interest in reforestation and forest management. And the post-hurricane interest in reforestation kind of outpaced the planning efforts. And so as a Climate Hub, we engaged in trying to develop more integrated planning methods where we can look at the full range of benefits from forests that include carbon sequestration, carbon markets, biodiversity, wood products, some of those things that kind of expand those benefits that had been on the radar in the last couple of decades. And so we've identified variation in the landscapes across the Caribbean and how reforestation objectives might vary based on the ecology, based on the land use, and how those benefits, or what we would look for in those benefits, would change, and how do we reach a point where we can get those benefits. And that's sort of forced us to develop a way of thinking more holistically, from the nursery and seedling availability to those benefits that you expect to receive from those mature forests. Not only integrating that time frame, but also integrating the idea of markets for those benefits, or actually realizing those benefits. How do you manage? How do you give advice? How do you provide incentives for benefits that private landowners or state or federal forest managers can actually receive? Are the markets there? Are the connections there? So that's a little bit of a snapshot of some of the efforts of the Climate Hub related to helping develop a new way of looking at our forests and how we can acquire these forest benefits. So that's it.
Thank you, Bill. Some great presentations there. Not seeing much in the way of questions yet, apart from this one from Sherry and Emily. It would be for Steve if he was here. So Sherry commented, ended on the salinity photo with trees. How is the salinity measured?
Yes. So this is probably where I dropped off and you missed what I was talking about. So salinity is measured via electrical conductivity. So the soil paste is used basically, and the electrical conductivity is measured as a surrogate for the saturated soil salinity. And so those stages that I mentioned, stage 0 through stage 5, there are different electrical conductivity ranges that would then define those different stages, and that would then define your adaptation and mitigation options related to crops. Some crops, of course, are more salt tolerant than others, and also related to trees and what you might expect on your landscape, depending on that measure of electrical conductivity.
Thanks, Emily. And I believe I'm looking at the right spot for Q&A. This is under the restream.io. Messages from the audience will display here, and I'm not seeing any others. Oh, Sherry says fascinating. Thank you. Great. And that was a good response. Thanks, Emily. So in the absence of any discussion points emerging just yet, I have one for you presenters. And it's something we hadn't touched upon really. Oh, just nick of time. Jeff asks, have all climate hubs been using the Aggressed Viewer to assess past weather and climate losses? Now, Emily, I know that you're the best person to start with this, but so I'll ask you to answer first, and then Bill and Jessica.
Right, so that's, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for that question. So the Aggressed Viewer is a national tool, and it shows data from the Risk Management Agency on crop loss. And so it goes back to 1989, and those data are down to the county level, and they report the cause of loss. And so that could be drought, that could be hail, that could be any sort of cause of loss related to the payments received via crop insurance. And so the data are at a national scale, but I'll be really interested to hear what Bill has to say from the Caribbean and from Puerto Rico, because they may not be as accessible in the same way. So I don't know if all hubs use the information. We certainly do in the Southwest, and at times we look across all of the 10 climate hubs in the nation.
Sure, maybe I'll comment a little. We would love to use the Aggressed tool viewer, but our risk management agency interacts with the local Department of Agriculture a little bit differently, so they handle the information differently. And we've actually had to put a lot of effort into working to gather data on productivity from the agriculture insurance company here that works as an intermediary between risk management agency and the farmers. And we're just getting to the point where we're starting to compile that information. We now have about 20 years, I think, of information from the Puerto Rico Agriculture Insurance Company that we could be integrate into the risk management tool. So we're you know, we're working towards that end, but often we have sort of a disconnect between data sets in the Caribbean islands and the mainland.
Thanks, Bill. Jessica, have you had a chance to use the Aggressed Viewer up there? I know that you're still fairly new to the hubs compared to us old timers, but
yeah. I don't have any great examples, although I do know we make people aware of it. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jessica. I'll add to the comments here that we do know others are using it. We had the National Centre of Appropriate Technology wanting to expand on the tool because they find it very useful. But that's part of another story. So Danelle from the Northern Plains Climate Hub says we do use the Aggressed Viewer, for example, to inform our presentations to county or state level agricultural groups. And it really is very interesting because we can look at like what we're seeing in our local agricultural area, what might be happening, what we think might be happening. And then we look at the Aggressed Viewer and we see how the bigger insured operations are actually being hit. So what we see commonly here in southern New Mexico is failure of irrigation supply, which is failure of water to even make it to the irrigation system, typically flood. So we would have thought drought, but no, it's actually failure of the irrigation supply. So with that being said, we're at, we've just got a couple of minutes left in this discussion session. Now, one thing that the audience might not be aware of, but might be pretty logical to assume, is that the funding structure is changing within the hubs, and we have more opportunities for what we do. We have opportunities to increase our staffing and work better with everybody because we have such a small staff right now. So one thing I'd like to hear very quickly from Emily, Bill, and Jessica is with the new opportunities that are presenting themselves, what do you see, or which part of your program are you most excited about expanding? I should say, let's start with Bill.
Okay, sure. I think having the staffing capacity, hopefully we'll get a little bit of increase in our capacity with a focus on climate change, just really allows us to maintain relationships with people, with this wide group of stakeholders that we work with, and continue to develop collaborations where we can develop tools, develop products that are useful to folks. Most of those come out of collaborations, but you have to recognize that you need the capacity to have, people that can make that collaboration work. And so I think just increasing that capacity so that we can maintain those relationships, build new relationships, that's going to be a great help for us.
Thanks, Bill.
I'll jump off there. I'll jump off because I agree completely, Bill. Increasing the capacity to work in the areas where we have greater demand than we currently have capacity. And that would be around our science synthesis work, our tool development and technology transfer work, and then also convening scientists and stakeholders. And the thing I'm most interested in doing as we move forward is working on adaptation and mitigation with small groups of people, working through a process of thinking about climate change impacts on our biggest stressors, water scarcity, wildfire, rangeland deterioration, those sorts of things, and coming up with some tactics and solutions that work for groups of people as we move forward.
Thanks, Emily. And last and certainly not least, Jessica.
Yeah, I'll third that. I think, and we're really excited to just reach new audiences, work with more people, like Emily said, do more synthesis, tool development that's really focused on needs of specific groups of people.
Thanks, Jessica. And I'm hearing from other folks behind the scenes that we are having speakers drop off behind the scenes occasionally. So I apologize in advance in case this happens again. Just a quick comment from John Wiener before we move on to the next session. And John Wiener, who is an old friend and a big fan of the hubs, it mentions that we could promote a comparison of the flood flow frequency estimations under the USGS Bulletin 17C, which may be very misleading, versus what more realistic approaches would show. And this could be a bridge to leveraging with EPA and urban and state funding for flood management and water quality. And that's a really interesting point. I've already copied it and sent it to Emily to add to her list. So thanks, John. So we will transition now to the next session. So we'll say goodbye to Jessica, Emily, and Bill, and welcome Lynn and Devon, Danelle, and let's see, Clay. Certainly last but not least, there we go, Clay. So welcome everybody. And Lynn, it's your turn to kick off this session, and Lynn is presenting on behalf of the Northeast Hub. And Lynn, perhaps you'd like to tell us a bit more about you before you start. Oh, and you're muted. You did my thing of not unmuting. Start again.
I'm so sorry. Hi, I'm Lynn Knight. I am a co-director for the Northeast Climate Hub. I am also an economist with USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, and I work for the East National Technology Support Center. So I'm going to talk about something a little different. I know that the previous groups talked about all the various different projects they did, and we've all just have so many projects under our belts and what we've been doing since 2014. This particular project, is a project that we're working on right now. With a group of the Climate Hub folks, as well as a partner with NC State, Rod Rejesus. So what we're doing is we're looking at, particularly from the Northeast, the economics of climate-smart soil health practices. What's so unique about the Northeast is that there really hasn't been much research done on soil health practices and the impacts, especially from an economic point of view. Let's see here. I want to also add that this was funded through NRCS and also the USDA Office of the Assistant Secretary of Civil Rights. I'm sorry, Office of Chief Economist. So what we're looking at here is that we're trying to improve the soil health because it is a natural climate solution by increasing soil carbon in soils. This may play a role in carbon sequestration, but more importantly, it's improving or hopefully improving agricultural productivity, sustainability, and food system resilience. For our project, what we're focusing on is on cover crops and no-till to improve soil health. And the reason that we picked those is because we're looking at long-term agricultural research sites through ARS. And many of these sites have been implementing no-till and cover crops for 15 to 30 years. And that's what's kind of unique about this project is we're looking at the long-term impact. We really don't have a good idea of how soil carbon can increase over time. So hopefully this project is going to help us with that. And also looking at the economics behind it. So we're gathering all of the inputs, costs, and machinery costs for implementing those practices over time. So what we're hoping to do is to better understand the economic dimensions that are related to the practice adoption for soil health. If you look at this little schematic here, it kind of talks about how we're analyzing soil health impacts. So you've got an initial soil condition, and you've also got the environmental influences going on, and that frames the benchmark condition on the soils. So if you implement best management practices on that, you're going to see hopefully a change of improved soil conditions, which would then lead to the healthier soils. And so there would be, from those healthier soils, both a private and public benefits from that. So when we identify what the public benefits are, that can help us provide valuable information towards implementation of programs by improving the policy tools. Once we know what these benefits are, or we can better identify what those benefits are. So this is a little bit about the project background and what we have to date, what we've found out to date so far. So we've conducted a literature review and we've synthesized the results of that literature, and that has been published through the Journal Soil Water Conservation. That was published, I believe, in May-June issue. Now, that was the shorter version. We are also looking at a larger version, which will be published as a general technical report through the Forest Service in partnership with NRCS. So we're collecting and analyzing the LTAR, that's long-term agricultural research data from these ARS sites. And there's various sites. We are looking primarily in the Northeast, but we've also included a few sites that are outside the Northeast, but have the same type of ecosystem that we expect in the Northeast. For example, in Kentucky and Ohio and Michigan. We're also looking at hopefully including a site in Ontario that's not an LTAR, but it's been in long-term soil health related practices, and they have the data. So we're hoping to use that data as well. So we're collecting that data right now. We're in the process of collecting the data for all those sites. We're also looking at county level analysis to examine the resilience effects for soil health practices. And we're doing that as a separate project. We're using some satellite data on cover crop adoption and looking at the crop insurance cause of loss data. And we're just beginning that part of the process right now. So this is the review, the literature review that we have already completed. And it does provide a synthesis of that research, mostly in the Northeast, but it also includes national updates as well, national research that's been done on soil health. And it's what we're looking at is the long-term dynamics of risk of the private benefits and costs versus external benefits and costs. And also important is that geographic heterogeneity. In other words, it really depends on the location of where these practices are implemented. And hopefully by putting this information together, we'll be providing information for determining the benefits that we can use for conservation programs. And there's the link to the journal article if you want to see it. So that's pretty much it for all I have to talk about. I'd be more than happy to talk more about this project. And like I said, it's still in process. We hope to have the data all collected by the end of this summer, and then we'll start the analysis. What we have found out about the one project here, let me go back 2 slides. The satellite data is we have done some preliminary analysis, and we found that it indicates that counties with higher cover crop adoption acres do tend to have lower crop insurance losses due to excess heat and excess moisture. So we are seeing a positive trend in that area, and we hope to have more conclusive information quite soon. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Lynn. That's terrific. I really like that last little result that you presented. That's very encouraging. Jeff is asking if we can put the link into the chat. Now, I'm not sure how to access the chat, but Lynn, if you want to drop it into the private chat, then perhaps our tech support might be able to help with that.
Is that for the journal article, that link? Is that what they're talking about?
I assume so, yes.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you. And Jeff, if for any reason we don't manage to get you that link, we will find a way to get it to you. So on to our next speaker, and this is Devon Johnson, who's presenting on the work that she's been doing with the California Climate Hub. So Devon, take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Awesome. So good morning, everybody. My name is Devon Johnson, and I'm an assistant specialist at the USDA California Climate Hub. And on behalf of my co-authors, I'd just like to share some of our work on opportunities and barriers to the adoption of soil health practices to combat the impacts of climate change in California. So climate change is threatening California agriculture. It's threatening agricultural production in our state. But fortunately, the state of California and the USDA have a shared goal to use science-based technologies that can sequester greenhouse gases, but have co-benefits of great resiliency. And soil management practices are a promising pathway that can help us meet this goal. So California leads the nation for producing and exporting specialty crops like almonds, processing tomatoes, wine, and table grapes, and strawberries, just to name a few of our over 400 products. All of these examples have experienced stress from climate change, which has impacted quality and quantity from the leading agricultural state. Among the many climate stressors, drought and water scarcity is perhaps the most concerning climate combination for producers. For example, the 2012 to 2016 drought cost the state's agricultural sector at least $3.8 billion. The state, like much of the West, is back in drier drought conditions. As you can see from the map on the left, most of the state is either in extreme or exceptional drought. This severity of drought may create cause for water curtailments, as shown in the dried up canal on the right of the screen. Extreme heat events are another very serious concern for growers. The graph on the left is showing the expected increase in the number of heat waves per year. The numbers in the circle show the increase from 4 heat waves per year to 35 to 51 by 2100. These types of record-breaking heat waves, similar to those seen earlier this month, may be manageable when water isn't in short supply. But without proper irrigation, they can lead to crop damage, as seen in the grape clusters and the images at the right of the screen. Drought and extreme heat are just two of the examples of how climate change has increased the need for soil health and other on-farm practices, leading to greater resilience while also sequestering greenhouse gases. But some examples of on-farm adaptive practices are reducing or eliminating tillage, the use of cover crops, and purposeful nutrient management. No-till and cover crops can reduce soil erosion and sequester carbon, among other benefits. Nutrient management can also come in many forms, like placing fertilizer close to the plant's roots, and offers benefits such as reducing nitrous oxide emissions and protecting water quality. Despite the benefits, adoption of these practices has been varied. In an attempt to understand the breadth of these challenges, the California Climate Hub, in coordination with researchers at UC Cooperative Extension, asked various technical assistance providers why they thought producers were not adopting these practices on a wider scale. The figure shows categories of terms mentioned more than 5 times in their responses. The orange slice of the graph shows 1/3 of the terms mentioned related to crops and cropping systems, suggesting that adoption may be dependent on the crop type in question. For example, some producers were concerned that using cover crops on their processing tomato field would take nutrients away from the tomatoes or interfere with planting and harvesting dates. From the same effort, we took the responses from the technical assistance providers to identify themes of barriers of adoption. 6 themes emerged, with the largest portion relating to lack of educational resources. This suggests technical assistance providers believes one of the key reasons producers are not adopting soil health practices is lack of education on the topic, with lack of funding coming in at a close second. Interestingly, 9% of responses spoke specifically to hesitancy on cover crops, which presents an opportunity for educational resources specifically on those benefits. Helping growers overcome these barriers is a top priority for the USDA California Climate Hub. Our hub works to address the challenges producers face in adopting soil health and climate adaptive practices in a variety of ways. For example, we create educational material and tools to help producers understand the benefits of adopting soil health practices. To this point, in coordination with UC Davis, UC Berkeley, and state agencies, we created a series of fact sheets to educate technical assistance providers on climate-smart agriculture examples, including soil health, carbon farming, compost, and other alternative soil amendments. Climate change is clearly a threat to California's highly diverse agricultural production. Our hub is committed to developing and delivering resources to enable climate-smart decision-making so that strategies like the soil health practices mentioned in this presentation may be adopted more broadly. With that, I'd like to say thank you for your time. And if you'd like to reach any of us at the California Hub, I have listed our contact information as well as our specialties here. Thanks again. And I think I will hand it over to Clay.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and try to get this hooked up here. The fun thing with technology, Katie was saying, is making sure that it works okay, but it looks like possibly mine's working all right here. I said, I'm Clay Pope. I'm with the USDA Southern Plains Climate Hub. I am a special projects coordinator under an agreement between the Hub and NRCS. And I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing as far as soil health. You know, when we started working on the Hub back in 2014, you know, we were looking for the area that we cover in Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas. Much of the time we are dealing with a skeptic, quite frankly, sometimes almost a hostile audience when you're talking about climate change. There is a lot of hesitancy to deal with the issue. So we needed to find something that helped us both mitigate and adapt climate change, because we do seriously have challenges out there when you think about the extreme weather events that climate change is exacerbating and what that means as far as the impact to farmers and ranchers. But at the same time, we also wanted to address some of the root causes of climate change. But we also needed to meet the producers where they were at. So what could we really find that fit in the model of what we're looking at in production agriculture, and also build off the conservation legacy of the region? Again, Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas, the heart of the old Dust Bowl region. This is an area where conservation does have a good legacy. How could we build off of that to try to address with this, work with the existing programs in the region, and try to find some success? Well, for us, soil health, or regenerative agriculture, if you will, really fit the bill on what we wanted to focus on. So if you look and see what we did to try to help spread the word on soil health in the region, we partnered with NRCS, local conservation districts, and state conservation agencies on health events and demonstration farms throughout the area that we cover. You know, one of the things that we found out in talking to farmers and ranchers, it's one thing to have a researcher, someone with extension, even a local district conservationist, or someone with the local conservation partnership talk to them. Where the rubber really hit the road was when they could talk to another farmer and rancher that was doing something on their land, could ask them what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and how they, you know, what they wanted to try next. So the idea of demonstration farms and field days and seminars that focused on producer activity, we felt really was the best way to go. We also wanted to try to help fill some of the holes that with our partners with NRCS and the other folks in the conservation system. Specifically, we focused on issues with, and we actually were able to help to establish the first tribal soil health demonstration farm in the United States with the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe, and then it's since worked with NRCS in our 3 states to try to expand that effort. So far, we've hosted over 20 field days and helped with many more local and state events throughout the region. COVID did kind of put us into a little bit of a bind, so we've had to be a little bit more creative on that. We do have a series of soil health podcasts, videos, and blogs. And one of the things that we've tried to do is start up a virtual demo farm this year. When we were in COVID, we couldn't get out on the road so much. Actually taking one producer and following his experience going from harvesting of wheat last year through the planting of cover crops, getting cattle out on cover crops, then getting his wheat back on the ground after he terminated those covers, getting cattle out on that wheat pasture, pulling them off, and then cutting again and harvest. This has been something that's been very well received. We've got another demo farm that we're starting the same way virtually, with producers taking some CRP land out of the program and putting it back into production using soil health practices. And we're hoping that we can continue to build on that through our outreach efforts, through our blogs, our podcasts, and social media. We've also done some things to help soil health into the region. One of the areas, especially with policymakers, we wanted to focus on highlighting the multiple benefits that are generated by soil health practices on the land. We put together a series of reports on bundled benefits, focusing on priority watersheds, where our state partners, again, had done work to actually take streams off of the EPA impaired list, the 303D list, using soil health practices. We came behind that then with the Comet Planner program from NRCS to calculate what roughly the high head cut of carbon sequestration and avoided emissions was from these practices on the land. We've now built on that with Oklahoma State University. We've got some research where they're using got some ongoing research that they've started where they're taking Comet Planner now and looking at that impact from all conservation title programs through Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas since the passage of the last Farm Bill. We also put together some promotional information for our partners. We have a series of posters that they have that they can hand out, put out in local coffee shops, feed stores, and the like. We also have got some public service announcements for radio that we have put together to help them promote the message of soil health throughout the region. And then finally, we wanted to focus on youth activities. You know, so much of the time, adults and folks are more set in their ways. You have some obstacles in trying to adopt new methods of farming and ranching, if indeed you have a system you pretty well worked out and feel comfortable with. So partnering together with NRCS and the Soil Carbon Coalition, we actually put together some curriculum. It was originally designed for FFA, agricultural education projects, but also 4-H folks. We've had other people use it. In fact, up to date, we've had folks from over 50 countries and 42 states now that have downloaded this curriculum that's out there to help teach that message to, but not just kids. You can also use it for adult education as well, and we're very proud of that. But that's basically what we've been doing in outreach. You can find some more about our podcast, our blogs and our videos at the Southern Plains Perspective site that we have, or you can go to the Climate Hub site for the Southern Plains for more information. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Danelle.
Great, thank you, Clay. Okay. And so, trying to get it into presenter here for you. Okay, I think that's what we've got. Sorry, folks, that it's not bigger. Welcome from the Northern Plains Climate Hub, circled here, a 6-state region spanning from Colorado up to Montana, and then North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. And you can see from the pictures at the bottom here that our region spans pretty diverse set of agricultural systems, from kind of traditional cow-calf operations in the rangelands of the West. And then over on our eastern edge, we have, you know, the classic corn, soy systems, and then this really fun region in the middle where they can do combinations of both of these things, so integrated crop and livestock systems. And last year, during this meeting, we focused on a rangeland product that our hub worked on called Grasscast, and Katie mentioned this earlier, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Grasscast this year. Just to tell folks, if you didn't see it last year, this is a grassland productivity forecast that comes out in early spring, mid-spring, to try and give you a preview of how well we think your rangelands might grow in the Great Plains region and in the Southwest. So you can check that out at grasscast.unl.edu. What I'd really like to focus on this year is our cropping systems, and 2 products in particular that our hub helped develop in collaboration with our extension partners and NRCS as well. The first is called Weather Ready Farms, and this was led by our colleagues at UNL Extension. And this is a really fun interactive website. You can find it at the hyperlink down at the bottom. It's weather-ready.unl.edu, and apologies that got cut off a little bit there on the screen. But if you Google Weather Ready Farms UNL, you'll come to this really fun interactive farm graphic. And up at the top, you can select kind of what season you're interested in, you know, spring, summer, fall, winter, and then what extreme weather conditions are you concerned about. And so this year in our region, hot, dry summer has been a big concern. And so this farm graphic will appear. And each of these icons you can click on. And down here at the bottom, it'll present kind of what is the challenge under these hot, dry summer conditions. What are some quick tips for addressing it to be more resilient? And then what are some resources if you want to dig in and learn more about how to combat this? And what's fun, right, is that if you are, you know, you're concerned about a different season or a different set of conditions. So in our region, cold, wet springs, they can happen in the same year that we have a hot, dry summer. And so if we click on cold, wet spring, again, the graphic changes. You can click again on each of these little icons. And again, it helps you have greater awareness of what the particular challenges are for a farm under these circumstances, some quick tips, and some resources, some trusted science-based resources to address them. So check that out, weather-ready.unl.edu. It's really fun, and I think it's a great way, especially for new extension educators, new NRCS field staff who maybe aren't familiar with the region that they've just moved to kind of get up to speed quickly on what the major challenges are. The last resource I wanted to share today is a story map called Learning from Your Neighbor. And it presents a really fun, interactive story about farmers' adventures in resilience and in climate resilience in particular. So you can see the hyperlink there. You can see the map on the right showing that we have 6 case studies so far in this story map, which is a living resource. And as you scroll through the story map, what you'll find are video interviews with producers themselves, sharing what their what innovative practices are they trying? What challenges have they encountered? And what lessons have they learned from those challenges? And what advice would they have for other farmers? As Clay said earlier, peer-to-peer learning is really powerful. So let's put this in the hands, put our farmers in front of the video if they're willing to. So just some examples here, you know, going up to North Dakota to hear from a producer who has been experimenting with no-till and strip-till. And you can access some extension bulletins associated with that topic. That same producer is now experimenting with grazing of cover crops. We moved down to Nebraska, and again, a Nebraska farmer who's experimenting with cover crops. And again, just really honest conversations about the challenges, the lessons, and the successes and tips for future success. This last one is a really cool story out of Montana with an irrigated sugar beet system, what we consider pretty challenging to implement conservation practices, but he's doing some really innovative stuff up there. So check out this story map resource. And with that, I would encourage anyone in the Northern Plains region to reach out and say hello if you'd like to partner on something. With that, I'll turn it back to Katie for our discussion.
Thanks, Tanel. And once again, I'd remind our audience to type your questions or comments in the chat or in the Q&A. Now, I finally figured out I can be logged on in 2 places at once, and I can monitor both. So one of the things that I had on my mind to ask you was, it harks back to a question that, or a comment that I had, I think it's from the Ohio Conservation Districts in the, Ellen to the rescue. Let's stop my question and ask Ellen's question, which is much more interesting than mine. So Ellen asks, how often do climate hubs hear directly from farmers? Farmers directly call you or email you with questions, or are your primary clients conservation professionals such as Extension and NRCS staff? So I present that to this panel, but also any Climate Hubs folks behind the scenes, you can answer that in the chat as well.
I can take that for the California hub specifically. I can't speak to the rest of the hubs, but I know that our hub speaks to mostly conservation staff. Seeing as I'm the new hire and the social scientist on the team, we've been having focus group interviews and have been analyzing those to really get to the meat of what these technical assistance providers are, seeing on the ground with farmers. So kind of like a middle ground between those 2 groups.
Thanks, Devin. And Clay, I'd be interested to hear your perspective, because I know your position is quite unusual within the hubs.
Well, I was getting ready to say, I'll just kind of echo what Devin said. It is a situation where, our primary, you'd have to say our primary audience would be those conservation professionals. But we actually do, before we did prior to COVID, we had a presence where we would actually go out we tried to hit at least 3 or 4 major farm shows in our area, try to be involved in some of these activities so that the hub was there. We could share that information directly with producers and get some feedback from them as to what they would like to see, or questions that they had, or some of the areas that they felt were unaddressed. But we try to work through that partnership. Again, as I'd mentioned, I actually am a contractor with NRCS through the hub, and we try to work through that existing network as much as possible. But it's a little bit of a hodgepodge. And like I mentioned, the student activities, we do everything from working with the conservation folks and other people like that to actually going out. In fact, next week I'm supposed to go out and run a rainfall simulator for a bunch of kids at a school group. So I mean, it's all over the board basically. But I would have to say primarily that working with our agency partners is our first place to go.
Thanks, Clay. And Lynn, were you?
Yes, I agree with both Devon and Clay in that we do primarily work with conservation professionals. However, we have every year until COVID also had a booth at the PASA annual meetings, Pennsylvania Association of Sustainable Ag. So we did interface with farmers directly through that. But we primarily work with, especially in our hub, we have built a very strong relationship with our universities and our other higher institutions of learning. And when we first had some money early in the program, we were providing funding to each one of these universities, trying to build up some of this coalition and capacity building. So I know that there was a question earlier asked about what we would do as we ramp up. And I'm sure that as far as our hub is concerned, that we will again start putting some more money towards our university partners.
Thanks, Lynn. I have a question here from behind the scenes from Emily, and it's for Clay and Lynn. Oh, I hope we haven't lost Lynn.
Sorry.
There we go. And that's, are you seeing more interest in soil health information recently, or is the need pretty consistent? And I think that probably really is applicable to all hubs. But Clay and Lynn, it's directed at you, and then perhaps Devon and Danielle can also answer.
Well, I can say as far as we're concerned, yes. I mean, there is an intense, you know, especially through NRCS and our partners, is that there's a lot of interest in soil health, particularly the economics. There has not been a lot of work done in the past looking at the economics of soil health. So we're hoping that we'll be able to fill in some of those blanks with this study and other studies as well. But I wouldn't say that there is more interest, but there is an intense interest. Let's put it that way.
Well, I would say we're seeing more of an interest in a lot of that. You know, I'd like to be able to say, well, of course, it's because of everything we've done at the hub, but it's working with our partnerships, especially with, you know, the folks in USDA, not just through the conservation partnership, but also extension. And when you stop and think about the discussions that are going on nationally, especially at a policy level on regenerative agriculture, soil health, whatever you want to call it, I think that's really added fuel to the fire. But we have seen since 2014 a decrease in extensive tillage. We've seen an increase in no-till and cover crop acres. We're pretty proud of that. Obviously, we've got a long way to go. We'd like to see a lot more adoption, but we've been very, very aggressive in partnering with our sister agency there at NRCS, with the conservation partnership, and trying to tie in to some of these other efforts to supplement what they're already doing. When we started out, we saw, again, soil health, those practices, minimizing tillage, keeping armor on the soil, keeping that root in the ground as much as possible, incorporating livestock, better pasture management, just going through that laundry list. We saw that as the low-hanging fruit on climate, both adaptation and mitigation. We jumped into it really to supplement what they were doing and to help bolster the efforts that were out there, and to answer some of those questions. And I think we've had some success, but like I said, we've got a longer way to go.
I do want to add, too, is that particularly in the Northeast, there's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of hesitancy in implementing soil health, especially cover crop and no-till. However, that being said, Maryland in particular has one of the highest percentage of cover crop coverage and no-till in the nation. So it's quite a dichotomy going from the southern part of the Northeast all the way up to, let's say, Maine, where they have a different set of challenges there. And so we're trying to help with that. You know, how do we overcome these obstacles?
Katie, and I know I'm cognizant of time here, but I do want to give a shout out. Lynn's last point reminded me, in the Northern Plains region, that South Dakota stands out as one of our best examples of where soil health interest and practices are really growing. And shout out to the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition and their role in making that happen. I think it speaks to the power of, again, that peer-to-peer learning network. And what I've seen grow in my region is an interest in other states in starting their own soil health coalition peer-to-peer learning opportunities.
Absolutely. They're just doing amazing stuff out there. And I'd just like to add to the points that we've all been making, is that I think we all recognize too that regenerative agriculture is a big movement, and those doing regenerative agriculture don't necessarily believe in climate, and that's not necessarily important to us so long as we can help those practices become adopted. So with that being said, it's best that I think we move on to the next session, and we say goodbye to Clay, Devon, Lynn, and Danielle. Welcome back, Emily, Danielle. And Dennis is joining us virtually. I have his video. And so Danielle, if you're ready to present, I will hand over to you. And Danielle is the coordinator of the Northern Forest Climate Hub.
All right, Katie, do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. And you hear my audio. Awesome. All right. Well, hello, and thanks to all of you for sticking with it. It's been a great symposium so far, so thanks to Katie and Emily for all the planning. My name is Danielle Shannon, and I am the coordinator of the Northern Forest Climate Hub, and that covers the Midwest and the Northeast regions. And like the California Hub, our specialty really is in forest management and its applications in watersheds as well. Today, my talk will be a little bit different. I will focus really directly on an example of our work, a pilot that we've been doing with Ashland County, Wisconsin, and their Land and Water Conservation District. And this pilot is a great example of how to integrate climate change into long-term county planning. As a note, through this work, we're really proud of Ashland County because they're the first county in the state of Wisconsin to fully integrate climate change into their 10-year land and water planning. And that was approved in 2019. Okay, so before I get started, I just want to frame this discussion. How do we incorporate an all-encompassing issue like climate change into county conservation long-term planning? And as a hub, we do get asked this question frequently, actually. And I'm sure some of us out there are probably hoping there's an easy button, a guidebook, magic tool, maybe a straight pipe that will transform our county plans into a climate change plan. But the reality is, as you're all aware, there really isn't an easy button in conservation and watershed planning, and that same applies to climate change. Now, what I want you to sort of reframe your thinking in that climate change really is a challenge that's going to affect our conservation work just for years to come. Not all counties are the same, and neither are their climate risks and conservation priorities, right? You know that, which inherently means all of us and all of our plans will look different from one another in many different ways. So we need to move away from that straight pipe, that one-size-fits-all model of thinking, and really embrace this choose-your-own-adventure model, where we might start from the same place, but make very different choices to create, that county plan that reflects our regional priorities and our unique county goals and values. We began working with Ashland County Land and Water Conservation District as a pilot in 2018-2019. And through this work, we've plotted out a course that will enable us to not only consider the impacts of climate change regionally, but also assess how the impacts will play out locally, and then use that information to support a selection of climate-informed conservation strategies into that long-term plan through a variety of different workshops and one-on-one engagements. For context, why Ashland County, Wisconsin, out of all of our 20 states? Well, Ashland County is, it includes multiple land uses from farming and forests, Great Lakes and urban, but they've also experienced some really significant historic flood events in 2016 and 2018. These events were completely devastating. Destroying roads and trails, culverts, bridges at an estimated $88 million in damages. So after all these events, the community members were very amenable to start thinking about ways that they could avoid damages from events like this in the future. Now, the nuts and bolts of the plan, it has a variety of different components, but what I want to show you is that it's more than just a climate change chapter. Although there is one, the assessment also integrates, regional available tools and reports to describe that observed and project change for the county, but then uses that, to create evident responses to those climate risks that are identified in that chapter by linking them to conservation strategies in later sections. The plan really is unique in that 25% includes climate adaptation strategies that support directly county, farm, and forest planning. Now, those strategies leverage conservation opportunities to help not only, increase benefits for conservation now and in the long term, but reduce those climate-related benefits in the long term. And the plan, as you might imagine, does focus at a landscape scale, so presents strategies to help those local planners invest in green infrastructure, water storage, and opportunities to slow water downstream where it makes sense for the customer in the county. Now, an effective tool used by Ashland County was the selection of adaptation strategies that were used as starting blocks to form these, climate-informed strategies, and they're available online and on our website. Some examples of those broad strategies are included here, and they're currently being used to identify and prioritize local planning projects, such as flood mitigation projects that can reduce fluvial erosion hazards now and also in the future. Now, this was a whirlwind, and I want you to be able to access the same type of resources. So what we've done is we've created a web page for you to go to on the Climate Hub website, where you can find all of these different tools and resources and help you in your own county planning sort of intentionally incorporate climate change in a variety of different ways. So that's all I have for now, and I will hand it off to Dennis Toddy virtually, and I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Thank you. I really appreciate your presentation and your pointer to that resource. That's such a great idea to be able to share that. So I have got Dennis's presentation here, and I'm just going to see if I can go ahead and share that screen. And hopefully it is showing, and then I can press play. Let's see.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Toddy. I'm the director of the USDA Midwest Climate Hub. I wish I could be with you live today, but unfortunately I've been called away to something else. So I want to talk with you a little bit about what the Midwest Hub is doing from a conservation standpoint, especially dealing with extremes across the north central U.S., especially extremes of precipitation. The north central U.S. Is an area where our heavily corn and bean growing area. Soybeans, we show this is USDA NASS data on the left-hand side. This is corn in the lower and the upper right-hand side. Hay, winter wheat are all common in these areas. Also small grains are grown in these areas. So large row cropped areas are part of what is done there. In addition to this, though, there are lots of specialty crops that are grown, especially in the Midwest Climate Hub area. The 8 states of the eastern and central part of the Corn Belt, where we have additional fruit crops, specialty crops, tree fruits, especially grapes, and also cranberries in Wisconsin, canned vegetables in Minnesota, pumpkins down in Illinois. So lots of additional crops, food crops, particularly that are grown in this area, that have additional types of needs dealing with conservation issues that we try to address. Now, when we're talking about extremes in this part of the country, extremes of precipitation are the 2 biggest ones, are probably the biggest one that we refer to most times in our programming. And most of these being extremes, wetness, and increases in precipitation. This is a graphic from the last National Climate Assessment that shows just that. The areas in green across all of these are showing increased precipitation over the last century. The darkest green showing as much as over 15% increases in precipitation over the whole north central U.S. And then down below, the seasonal changes in precipitation, winter, spring, summer, and fall, with 2 of the biggest areas of concentrations of increases in precipitation are the spring and the fall, which, as most people know, those are heavy times for field traffic and great opportunities, large opportunities for losses of soil and other soil damaging problems because of increased precipitation. So we talk about this a great deal in our programming about the effects of changes in precipitation and encouraging people to change their soil management practices to be able to deal with these kinds of issues. This has occurred several times frequently. One of the most extreme ones recently was in the spring of 2019, where we had the culmination of a wet period starting in the latter part of 2018. The fall of 2018 led to a very wet spring in the 2019, culminated in March of 2019 with a very large precipitation event that occurred over much of the plains and Midwest. Lower right-hand side showing the March through May period, where it ranks out of 125 years of data. Top 10 wettest that it came after a very wet period in the winter and the previous fall, and also very cold conditions, which led from a crop perspective to delayed planting and delayed emergence. In fact, historically late for both of these. This is data from mid-June showing USDA NASS crop reporting situation with corn planted the upper left-hand side and corn emerged in the lower right-hand side with record late. We're still mid-June and we're still talking about emergence and planting of corn being historically late, leading to problems throughout that growing season. Conversely, we have going on right now a very dry situation in much of this area, and the upper left-hand side showing precipitation rankings for April through June of 2021, showing up in the top 15 to top 10 in the northern plains, a little bit better as we get over to the central and eastern part of the Corn Belt. So huge extremes that we're dealing with, things that we try to encourage people to deal with and plan for ahead of time. But then also things that we try to address and talk to people about in real time, trying to let them know of current conditions and potential upcoming conditions that they can address to try to reduce the impact of these on their crops and their fields. The main one that we have done for we're in year 10 now is a monthly climate drought outlook with partners from NOAA, USDA, state climate partners, regional climate partners throughout the region, sharing information and sharing and presenting of these. So trying to give people basically what's going on, what's the impact of what's going on, and what the outlooks mean, and what the outlooks could portend for them, and helping them to try to manage through some of these extremes. Because we are in year 10 of this, we're doing a review of this. This document on the right-hand side is kind of reviewed by the numbers of these, the number of presenters, number of attendees, and some of the pieces that we have done with, that we have shared over time with this. There's a deeper look at this, interviewing and talking to some people about some of the impact and information that people have been able to use and the decisions they've been able to make because of this. More of this will be coming out. And again, these are to try to deal with the wide-ranging extremes, to address those wide-ranging extremes throughout our region. So if you have any other information, I'd be happy to talk with you about it anytime. Here's my contact information, and hope you have a great rest of your session.
Great. Okay, so we have Dennis all completed, and we're on to our final presentation, which is back to Emily on her home ground, Southwest Climate Hub. And Emily will talk to us about the Drought Learning Network.
Thanks, Katie, and everyone. Thank you for sticking with us. The last presentation of our session, again on extremes. We're talking about, in this session, about peer-to-peer learning and the development or the evolution of the Southwest Drought Learning Network. So I'll try to be quick in this presentation, so we'll have a little bit of time for discussion with Danelle. Our region has 4 deserts and the Colorado Plateau, so much of our mainland region in the Southwest is arid to semi-arid, as you can see here, with very low annual precipitation. And this, of course, affects our water resources, our forested resources, our agriculture, and the entire ecosystem, all of our communities, both rural and urban. One thing I'd like to note is that in 2018, there was an exceptional drought that persisted over the entire Colorado Plateau region for almost all of the year. This led to water scarcity, burning forests, deteriorated rangeland conditions. It also, animals and livestock dying because of lack of water. It also led to some amazing peer-to-peer efforts. Really, we saw people coming together to respond to some of the challenges that they were seeing. And that is what led the Southwest Climate Hub, along with the National Drought Mitigation Center and the National Integrated Drought Information System, to come together and develop a prototype for the Drought Learning Network so that we could address the future risks of drought in our region. So one of the main goals of the Drought Learning Network is to retain management lessons learned in planning and preparing for, responding to, and recovering from drought. We did a survey of resource managers in our region, and 95% were very interested to somewhat interested in information about best practices from their peers. They really wanted to hear from people, you know, what worked, maybe what didn't work in responding to and recovering from drought. A second goal of the DLN is fostering knowledge exchange between resource managers and climate service providers. So when we understand what people need to support their decision making and what types of questions they're asking, we can better provide data. At the same time, data aren't the only important piece. And so when we understand what resource managers are seeing on the ground, that's very helpful for climate service providers moving forward. The third important goal of the Drought Learning Network is responding collectively during future drought. This evolved in, you know, historic drought in 2018. We've had another longer, worse drought since then, since the development of the network, that's still persisting in our region. So there's an acknowledgement that these conditions will come about again, and we need to work with our partners to best respond to that, especially in our region. So in early 2020, just before COVID, we had a workshop with folks in our region to envision a drought learning network. At the end of that workshop, there were teams of people who wanted to work on specific topics. So this evolved during this 2-day workshop, and those teams of people hosted 11 drought briefings, developed a prototype drought impact reporting workshop. So how can we get more information from folks on the land about what they're seeing? Hosted 10 webinars on things like soil health. We heard from Clay and Lynn about that earlier. Worked specifically with groups such as the indigenous communities in our region. Wrote and published 7 peer-reviewed drought case studies and used an existing framework to share those. And that's one thing we try to do. We leverage what people are already doing and work together to advance each other's work. Also developed a survey about information source preferences, launched a website. It's still a prototype, but I share it here for your awareness, and hired a few managers, which is really helpful in this effort. So we had another annual meeting. These are our 2021 Drought Learning Network teams. We have 5 teams. They range from working on drought and agriculture, working with indigenous communities, sharing what kinds of climate projections people might need, sharing management practices that have worked and haven't worked, and then how to advance drought impact reporting and drought response. So we have a few minutes left. Our next annual meeting is in February. I invite you to join one of these teams if you're interested. My contact information is here. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Katie. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. Terrific bunch of presentations. We literally have 3 minutes left for any questions. And I see of our presenters, we still have Danielle, Lynn, and Devon. Any question? Well, actually, I should bring up the question or the comments rather, because we had rather a busy chat here from Claire. And Claire asked, how can organizations like the Soil and Water Conservation Society better help communicate out all the incredible work being done by the Climate Hubs? So we've posted some responses in the chat, but very quickly, 10 seconds, 15 seconds answer each.
One idea that came up pretty immediately from all of us was that we do have regional newsletters and a national newsletter, and that's just a really great opportunity to sort of get a refresh on all of the things that we're doing, as well as a direct link to our tools and partner tools as well.
I'll add to that if you've seen tools during today's presentation, help us get the word out about those. You know, tweet about them, provide a link in your newsletter. That would be tremendously helpful. We want traffic to this information.
I'll also add about the climatewebinars.net. We've done a number of webinars over the last several years that folks might find useful. And one thing that we did not bring up is that Elizabeth Marks, who was an NRCS liaison last year, has developed a climate training for conservationists, and that will be on AgLearn soon. And I believe that she will also be posting that on YouTube. So that hopefully will be available. She tailors it for each state as she talks, so that they get the specific information from each state.
And I will, thanks, Lynn. I will jump in and say thanks to Claire for inviting some of us to serve as keynote speakers at your annual meeting and share the information that way. That was really helpful in getting the word out about a lot of our programs. So thank you, Claire, for your continued support. Also, I saw a question about the USGCRP, and many of us serve as authors or CLAs for the National Climate Assessment for the different regions and different sections of that. So that's one way that we participate directly, as we are all scientists. So we participate directly in our scientific capacity in the National Climate Assessment.
Great, thank you. And I think with that, we've got literally 30 seconds to go. So thanks everybody for attending our session. We really appreciate you being here. We're sad we can't see you. Thanks to our panel speakers, and thank you to Katie Flahive behind the scenes, who's been our amazing tech. So kudos to Katie. Thank you. Bye, everybody.